I never thought I'd fall in love again at the age of 76, especially not while arguing with a lawyer about the legal rights of a 12-pound tabby cat. But life has a funny habit of sneaking up behind you, poking you in the ribs and whispering, "Bet you didn't expect this one, old man." My name is Henry Callahan, and according to Forbes and a couple of board accountants, I'm a multimillionaire. According to my ex-wife, I'm a selfish fossil. According to my children, I'm a walking ATM with a pulse. And according to my cat, Chairman Meow, I exist to refill his food bowl and serve as an inconveniently mobile cushion. If I'm being brutally honest, the cat is the only one who's never disappointed me. So, on a bright Tuesday morning, one of those mornings when the sun shines just enough to irritate you but not enough to cheer you up, I found myself in the polished, expensive lobby of the law firm Parker and Reed, preparing to do something every wealthy old man considers at least once: rewrite his will out of sheer spite. "Mr. Callahan?" The receptionist smiled at me as if she'd been trained by Disney animators. "Ms. Bennett will see you now." Ms. Bennett. I had imagined a woman in her late 50s, severe bun, glasses, maybe a scent of mothballs to match the legal textbook. Someone who would nod politely as I explained why my cat deserved my fortune more than my blood-sucking relative. Instead, I walked into her office and froze like a deer seeing a self-driving Tesla for the first time. She stood from her desk, and everything about her was so startlingly alive it made the room feel suddenly underlit. She was young, too young for me to be thinking whatever I immediately thought, maybe 30, 33 at most. Long dark hair tied in a loose ponytail, sharp cheekbones, focused eyes the color of fresh coffee, and a suit so cleanly tailored it made law look like a fashion industry. "Mr. Callahan," she said, stepping forward and offering her hand. "I'm Amelia Bennett." Her voice was calm, warm, and maddeningly professional. For a moment I forgot why I was even there. I shook her hand. "You're my lawyer?" She smiled, and the smile was polite, but her eyes flashed with something: confidence, maybe amusement. "Yes. Unless you're here for an audition. Then I'm afraid you've got the wrong room." I laughed harder than the joke deserved. A 76-year-old man will take any attention he can get if it's wrapped in a good suit. She gestured to the chair in front of her desk. "Please, make yourself comfortable." I sat down, watching her move with that fluid efficiency young people have when their backs don't crack like fireworks. "So," she said, flipping open a notebook, "you want to make changes to your estate plan. The note says it's urgent." I cleared my throat. "Yes. I want to leave everything to my cat." She didn't blink. "Your cat." "Correct." "And nothing to your children?" "No." "And nothing to your ex-wife?" "Especially not her." For the record, my ex-wife, Lydia, is 62, has the smile of a soap opera villain, and remarried a plastic surgeon 2 months after our divorce. A man, I should add, who looks like he took the Hippocratic Oath as a personal challenge to do the opposite. Amelia finally raised an eyebrow. "May I ask why you want to leave your entire estate to Chairman Meow?" "If I leave it to my kids," I said, "they'll spend it fighting over it. If I leave it to my ex-wife, she'll use it to pay for an even younger husband. The cat, at least, won't waste it." Amelia tapped her pen against the notebook. "Legally speaking, animals can't own assets, but we can establish a pet trust. A caretaker would be appointed, someone to manage the funds on the cat's behalf." "Perfect." She hesitated. "Who would be the caretaker?" That's when it occurred to me that I didn't trust a single person in my family with grocery money, let alone my wealth. I scratched my chin. "I haven't thought that far ahead." Amelia nodded slowly. "Choosing the wrong caretaker could lead to exploitation. The money is supposed to be used for the well-being of the animal, not appropriated." I sighed. "You don't know my family. They'd fake the cat's medical bills and buy yachts." For the first time, Amelia gave a real laugh. It was short, soft, and entirely disarming. And that was the beginning of my downfall. 2 hours later, we were still talking about my assets, my business, my life, and, strangely enough, my favorite childhood cereal. She asked sharp questions, the kind that made me feel both incompetent and oddly proud. She listened without judgment when I explained why I wanted to cut off my children. They treat me like an inconvenient inheritance waiting to happen. She nodded sympathetically when I described Lydia's most famous insult. "He's rich in money and bankrupt in personality." But the strangest part was this. The more I talked, the more human I felt. Not a walking wallet. Not a senile old clown. Just a man. She even met Chairman Meow via a photo on my phone. He's adorable, she said. He's also a manipulative tyrant. Perfect match for you then. I should have been offended. Instead, I felt 14 again. At noon, she suggested taking a short break while her assistant printed draft documents. We can step out for coffee, she said. If you'd like. I absolutely liked. We walked 2 blocks to a small cafe crowded with office workers pretending to enjoy their salad. Amelia ordered a black coffee. I ordered what she ordered because suddenly I wanted to appear like a man of refined taste instead of someone who usually drinks decaf with 3 sugars. We sat by the window, sunlight spilling across the table. She crossed her legs, leaned slightly toward me, and asked, "Why do you think your family treats you this way?" The question caught me off guard. I wasn't a perfect father, I admitted. I was busy, distracted, sometimes selfish. But I wasn't a monster. I provided for everyone. I gave them what they wanted. Maybe too much. She stirred her coffee. Money complicates relationship. People stop seeing the person and start seeing the opportunity. Exactly. But leaving all your wealth to a cat, she said carefully, might create turbulence. I laughed. By turbulence, you mean complete nuclear meltdown. Yes, she said. Something like that. She sipped her coffee. But it's your right to choose peace in your own way. The way she said it, soft, thoughtful, made me feel understood in a way no one had in years. Outside, traffic hummed and pedestrians rushed past, but our little table felt strangely insulated from the world. In a brief third-person sort of moment, one of those cinematic observations, if someone had walked by the window and glanced inside, they might have seen an old man leaning toward a young woman with a look of gentle admiration, unaware that his whole life was tilting on its axis. Of course, I didn't know that yet. I only knew she made me feel awake. We spent the afternoon reviewing financial accounts and legal structures. Somewhere between my offshore holdings and my real estate portfolio, I realized I was enjoying this more than any business meeting in the last 20 years. When we finished, she stood. "I'll prepare updated documents for you by Friday. But we need to decide on the caretaker for Chairman Meow." "I'll think about it," I said. She offered her hand again. "It was a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Callahan." "Henry," I corrected. "Call me Henry." She hesitated just a heartbeat before smiling. "Henry." I left the office feeling 10 years younger, or 10 years stupider, depending on how you looked at it. Because as soon as I stepped out onto the sidewalk, I saw him. Victor Hale. My ex-wife's private investigator. A tall, angular man with cheekbones sharp enough to cut steaks and a trench coat he clearly wore for dramatic effect. He leaned against a streetlight, pretending to smoke a cigarette that wasn't lit. He definitely saw me with Amelia. He definitely made a mental note. He definitely planned to tell Lydia. I sighed and walked toward my car. The war had officially begun. That evening, I returned to my mansion. Big house, lonely halls, too many rooms for a single cranky man and a judgmental cat. Chairman Meow greeted me at the door with a meow that translated loosely to, "Where have you been, peasant?" I scooped him up. "You'd like her," I told him. He blinked at me with royal indifference. "She's brilliant. Sharp. Kind. Probably thinks I'm ridiculous, but still." He licked his paw, uninterested. "And," I added, "she didn't laugh at the cat trust idea." He stared at me with the cold assessment of a furry emperor evaluating a particularly disappointing servant. "Fine," I said. "Be that way." I set him down and walked to the bar. I poured myself a glass of scotch, the kind so expensive it makes you feel worse drinking it alone. As I sipped, I replayed the day in my mind. Her laugh. Her eyes. Her calm way of slicing through my nonsense. The flash of mischief when she teased me. The way she said my name. Not Mr. Callahan, but Henry, like I was still a man worth saying a name for. And for the first time in a very long time, I felt something bloom in my chest. Excitement? Hope? Idiocy? Probably all three. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My daughter, Rebecca, had called me 6 times. My son, Daniel, left a voicemail full of passive-aggressive disappointment. My ex-wife sent a text that read, "We need to talk." Now, this could only mean one thing. Hale had reported in. I called Rebecca first. She answered instantly. Dad, why were you at a law firm yesterday? Victor said you were meeting with some young woman. I was updating my will. Why? What are you planning? Are you sick? No. Are you dying? Not at the moment. What did you change? Nothing you need to worry about yet. You're being evasive. And you're being nosy. She groaned dramatically. Dad, please, don't do anything reckless. Define reckless. Anything that reduces my inheritance. At least she was honest. I hung up and called Daniel. The conversation was nearly identical, except he added, if you cut me out, I'm suing. Charming children I raised. Finally, I called Lydia. She answered with that perfectly polished Hollywood voice she'd cultivated after the divorce. Henry, she purred, I heard you're making interesting decisions. I don't see how my decisions concern you anymore. They concern me when they're stupid. Thank you for your concern. Goodbye. Don't you dare hang up. I hung up. The phone rang again instantly. I turned it off. I leaned back in my chair, rubbing my temples. All that fuss over a visit to a lawyer. Imagine their reaction when they discovered the cat was their biggest rival. For the next 2 days, I tried to return to my normal routine, breakfast with the cat, reading the paper, complaining about modern television, but my thoughts kept drifting back to Amelia. I replayed every moment of our meeting, every smile, every question, every accidental brush of her hand against mine as she passed me a document. Ridiculous, I told myself. She's decades younger. She's your lawyer. She's a professional. But Desire doesn't care about logic, dignity, or the appropriate boundaries of attorney-client relationship. And something about her made me feel alive. Like life wasn't done with me yet. Friday arrived, and with it, an email from Amelia. Your documents are ready for review. Feel free to stop by today or schedule an appointment for next week. I didn't even pretend to wait. I replied, coming in today. Chairman Meow watched me put on a nicer shirt than usual. Don't look at me like that, I told him. I'm only going for legal reasons. He blinked skeptically. At the law firm, Amelia greeted me with that calm, confident composure that made her feel both untouchable and impossibly near. Henry, she said warmly. Good to see you. Good to see you. Those 4 words hit me harder than scotch. We spent the next hour reviewing document. She was focused, precise, explaining each clause in that measured voice that made legal jargon sound like poetry. But something was different today, an energy between us, subtle but unmistakable. Once we finished, she closed the folder and asked, Have you thought about the caretaker for your cat? I hesitated, and out of all possible answers, my brain short-circuited and delivered the most reckless one. What about you? She froze. Then she laughed. Softly at first, then with genuine surprise. Me? You want me to manage millions of dollars for your cat? Well, I said, you seem responsible. Henry, she said gently, I'm flattered, but that's highly inappropriate. I winced. Yes, I know. Forget I said anything. She studied me for a moment, her expression unreadable. I don't think you meant anything wrong by it. But you're lonely. And you're under a lot of family pressure. Important decisions should come from clarity, not emotion. She was right. But her understanding only pulled me deeper. Thank you, I said quietly. She looked at me with something soft in her eyes, warm, empathetic, human. You're welcome. We sat in silence for a moment, tension hanging between us like a tightrope we both pretended not to see. Then she stood. Let's finalize the signatures next week. Take some time to think. I nodded. But as I walked out of her office, I knew thinking wouldn't help. Because I was already in trouble. And I had the feeling trouble was only getting started. I spent the weekend pacing my mansion like a man waiting for a jury to announce a verdict, except the jury consisted of a cat who refused to acknowledge my existence unless I opened a can of tuna. Every time I drifted toward a reflective surface, a mirror, a window, even the polished steel of the refrigerator, I'd catch my own expression. Distracted, stupidly hopeful, annoyingly aware of my own heartbeat. It was embarrassing. I hadn't felt this kind of restless anticipation since I was 22 and waiting to see if Linda Prescott, the prettiest girl in my college dorm, would agree to go dancing with me or use my shoelaces as evidence that I was unfit for society. Life has a way of circling back. But this time, the stakes felt higher. Not because Amelia had said anything to encourage me, she had been perfectly professional, even when I'd said that idiotic thing about her being the cat's caretaker, but because something in me had shifted. A gear that had been rusted for decades suddenly turned, and now everything was in motion whether I liked it or not. On Monday morning, I received a message. Henry, we can finalize the documents Wednesday afternoon. I'll have everything prepared. Amelia. Short. Direct. Professional. Good. That meant my imagination could stop producing cinematic nonsense in which we exchanged flirtatious glances over legal forms. I wrote back. Wednesday works. See you then. I stared at the message before sending it, wondering if I should add something friendly, a touch of warmth. Something like hope your week is off to a good start or give my regards to the only sane person in my life. The sane person being her, not the cat. But no. Simplicity was safer. Chairman Meow hopped onto the counter and stared at me like he knew I was about to embarrass myself. Don't judge me, I muttered. He blinked, unimpressed. On Tuesday afternoon, Trouble arrived wearing too much perfume and a smile that had bankrupted 2 alimony agreements. Lydia. She marched into my house as if she still owned the place. The cleaning staff didn't even bother stopping her. She'd been terrorizing this address for years. Henry, she said, sweeping into the living room. We need to talk. I disagree. Don't be childish. That's rich coming from a woman who once set my golf clubs on fire because she didn't like my travel schedule. That was symbolic. It was arson. She rolled her eyes and sat down across from me, crossing her legs the same way she used to before telling me she'd spent $10,000 on a purse for investment. Victor told me you were meeting with a very young lawyer, she said, studying her nails. A beautiful one, apparently. I sighed. You pay that man too much. He's observant. And he's concerned. He's concerned about his paycheck. Well, I'm concerned about you. No, you're concerned about losing money. She snapped her gaze up. So you are changing your will. I didn't answer. Her nostrils flared. Henry Callahan, don't you dare do something idiotic. You have responsibilities. Children who expect. Children who treat me like an estate sale. You're overreacting. I'm reacting appropriately to years of being treated like a declining stock portfolio. She stood abruptly. Just tell me one thing. Are you involved with this lawyer? I scoffed. Don't be ridiculous. She narrowed her eyes. I know you. I know that look on your face. What look? The one where you're about to make a ruinous decision because a woman smiled at you. I bristled. You're projecting your own history onto me. Her lips thinned. If you let some young opportunist manipulate you, don't expect me to clean up the mess. I laughed. Clean up the mess? You left the marriage with half my assets and a surgeon with a yacht. That yacht is leased, she snapped. And he's very talented. I held up a hand. Please. Spare me. She started pacing. Henry, listen to me. Young women don't fall for men our age unless they want something. Maybe I'm charming. Maybe you're delusional. We glared at each other for a long moment. Finally, she softened. Not much, but enough to seem human. Just be careful, she said quietly. And just like that, she left, her perfume lingering like a warning. After she was gone, I poured myself a drink and sat on the couch, the silence thick with unwanted truth. Was I being delusional? Was this ridiculous? A 76-year-old man developing feelings for a 30-something lawyer sounded like the plot of a movie that would get roasted by critics for unrealistic male fantasy. I didn't want that. I didn't want to be stupid. But I also didn't want to crawl back into the coffin of emotional numbness I'd been living in for years. Somewhere between those two extremes was a space where I hoped sanity might live. Wednesday arrived too quickly. I dressed carefully, a clean shirt, jacket, even polished my shoes. My reflection in the mirror looked startled by its own formality. You look like you're going to a wedding, I muttered at myself. Or a disaster. Hard to tell which. I drove to the law firm, my pulse tapping against my ribs like a nervous drummer. The elevator doors opened and there she was, stepping out of her office. Amelia looked. Radiant isn't the right word. She was simply herself, and that was enough to make the room appear better designed. Henry, she said warmly. Good to see you. That line again. My weakness. She welcomed me into her office, and we began reviewing documents. But something was off today. She was distracted. Slightly tense. The kind of tension you can only spot when you've stared at someone for too long, memorizing the small movements. At one point, she misplaced a page and muttered, "I'm sorry. Just a hectic morning." I leaned back. "Is everything all right?" "Yes. Just something personal." Her tone had an edge, a hesitation, as if she wasn't sure she should say more. I didn't press. Professional boundaries. Vulnerability. All those things people twice my age and half my experience pretend to understand. We continued working. When she handed me the final document, our fingers brushed. It was nothing. A millisecond. A static spark. But for reasons I cannot rationally defend, that moment knocked the air out of me. She pulled her hand back quickly, too quickly. "Henry," she said softly, "before you sign anything, you need to hear something." I tensed. "What is it?" She closed the folder slowly, deliberately. "My firm received a request yesterday." "A request for what?" "For a copy of your estate documents." A chill ran through me. "From whom?" She hesitated. "Your ex-wife's investigator." "Of course. Hale. That trench-coated ghoul." "I didn't grant it," she said firmly. "It's confidential. But the fact that they're already trying to access your paperwork means someone is preparing for conflict." I exhaled sharply. "Let them prepare. It's my estate." "I know. But they might challenge the will if they claim you were manipulated." I stared at her. "Are you saying they'll accuse you?" She looked down. "They might." A slow burn of anger rose in my chest. "They'll accuse you of manipulation because you're young and competent," I muttered. "And because they assume every woman is trying to seduce me for money." She looked up, and her eyes were sharp with something. Frustration, maybe hurt. "Henry, this isn't about seduction." I swallowed hard. "I know." She folded her hands. "You need to be certain about these changes. Very certain. Because if your family challenges the will, everything will be scrutinized. Including her. Her integrity. Her reputation as a lawyer." That thought hit me harder than I expected. I didn't want to be the cause of any damage in her life. "Thank you for telling me," I said quietly. "Of course." She gave a small smile. Not warm, not cold, just real. "You're my client. I look out for you." Those words should have comforted me. Instead, they carved a strange ache into my ribs. We finished the session in a haze of quiet tension. She explained everything with her usual clarity, but the atmosphere had changed. There was a sense of something hovering between us, possibility, danger, or just the awareness of how fragile everything could be. When we finished, she closed the folder. "I'll file everything tomorrow. You'll get confirmation by email." "Thank you." She stood. "Take care, Henry." "You too." I turned to leave. And then she said something that stopped me like a hand to the chest. "Henry." I faced her. "I meant what I said." Her voice was gentle, almost too gentle. "Don't let anyone pressure you into decisions. Not your family. Not me. Not yourself." My throat tightened. "I'll try." She gave the smallest nod. I walked out of the office with a sensation that I couldn't name, something between heartbreak and anticipation, between fear and hope. Outside the building, the sun hit the glass windows and turned the street into a shimmering blur. And standing across the street, watching me with the intensity of a starving hawk, was Victor Hale. He lifted his phone, took a picture of me exiting the building, and smiled. Not a friendly smile. A smile that said, "I know everything I need to know." It was a smile that promised war. I drove home furious, but not at Hale or Lydia or even my children. I was angry at myself. For letting emotions complicate something straightforward. For letting myself become vulnerable. For letting the possibility of affection, real or imagined, cloud my judgment. When I entered the house, Chairman Meow trotted toward me, tail high. "Well," I told him, dropping into a chair, "I've done it. I've managed to fall for a woman half my age, who thinks of me as a client with a problematic family." He blinked. "And now my own ex-wife's goon is taking pictures of me like I'm a celebrity caught with a scandal." He yawned. "And if I'm not careful, I'm going to ruin this woman's career without meaning to." He walked away. "Coward," I muttered. I poured myself a drink, but it didn't help. Nothing helped. Not until the doorbell rang. I frowned. No one visited me without warning. I opened the door. Standing there, wearing an expensive coat and an expression that could slice through glass, was my daughter Rebecca. "Dad," she said, pushing past me, "we're going to talk. Right now." I groaned. "Wonderful." She marched into the living room, dropped her purse, and spun to face me. "I know what you're doing," she declared. "I know everything. You know nothing. I know that you've rewritten your will. I know that you've been spending time with that lawyer. I know you're being irrational. And I know," she added dramatically, "that you're being manipulated by a woman who probably sees you as easy prey." My jaw clenched. "Stop right there." "No. You stop." She stepped forward. "Dad, she's young. She's attractive. And you're lonely. That combination is dangerous. I'm aware. Are you? Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be acting like a hormone-crazed teenager." "That's enough." She glared. "You're letting her trick you." I exhaled slowly, very slowly. "Rebecca. Amelia hasn't tricked me into anything. She's been nothing but professional. So far." "So far," I repeated. "And even if she weren't, it's my estate. My life. My decisions." Her expression changed, slightly softer, slightly sadder. "Dad, you're chasing something that isn't real." I looked away. "Maybe. But it feels real." A long silence settled between us. Then she sighed. "I just don't want you to get hurt." The words, in their simplicity, caught me off guard. She touched my arm briefly. "Or taken advantage of." For a moment she was the child I remembered, wide-eyed, honest, worried. Not the woman constantly fighting for financial security she didn't need. I softened. "Thank you for caring. But you're wrong about her." "Time will tell," she said. Then she grabbed her purse and left. Just like that. No goodbye. Just a warning. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking of Amelia, of the tension in her shoulders, the cautious tone in her voice, the way she'd warned me about the private investigator. For the first time, I wondered not how she might hurt me, but how I might hurt her. I didn't want to become another problem in her life. Another complication. Another man she had to navigate with careful wording and polite smiles. I wanted to protect her. And wanting to protect someone is far more dangerous than wanting to love them. Because love can be ignored. Instinct cannot. At 2 a.m., I walked to the balcony overlooking the backyard, the night cool and quiet. In a soft third-person angle, a moment outside myself, I saw an old man standing under the moonlight, his shoulders slightly bent, his expression caught between regret and longing. A man who had spent decades building an empire, only to discover he'd built no place to put his heart. A man finally realizing what he wanted, and how complicated wanting could be. Somewhere in the shadows, a future was forming, messy, unpredictable, full of collisions and consequences. And at the center of it all stood a young lawyer with steady eyes. And a cat who would one day inherit a fortune. The perfect storm. I woke up the next morning with Pepper sprawled across my chest like a furry paperweight. The light through my windows had that accusatory golden glow, the kind that makes you feel like you've slept through something important, like, say, your own good judgment. My first conscious thought was of Harper. Her copper-toned hair catching the office light, her calm voice, the way she listened as if nothing in the universe mattered more than my rambling about wills and cats. My second conscious thought was that I had absolutely no business thinking about her at 7 in the morning with a cat drooling on my pajama shirt. Pepper opened one eye, yawned, and kneaded his claws into my ribs. A loving reminder that he, not Harper, was the center of my legal universe. "Good morning, Your Highness," I muttered, pushing myself upright. Pepper meowed, then promptly fell off the side of the bed and strutted away as if it had never happened. Some creatures maintain dignity in any situation. Pepper is not one of them. As soon as I reached the kitchen, I discovered I was not alone. Lou was leaning against the marble island, sipping iced tea despite the fact that the morning temperature was barely above Arctic. "Morning, boss," he said. "You're up late. Everything all right? You look contemplative." Lou has been with me long enough to know that when I look contemplative, something has gone terribly wrong or terribly right. Usually both. "I'm fine," I said. "Just thinking." "About what?" "A lawyer." Lou raised an eyebrow. "Ah," he said. "The plot thickens." "There is no plot," I insisted, grabbing a bottle of orange juice from the fridge. "She's revising my will." He nodded, slow and dramatic. Of course. Classic romance setup. I glared at him. She's 29. I'm 73. That's not a setup. That's a cautionary tale. Lou shrugged. Age is just a number. A very big one in your case, but still. I threw a dish towel at him. He dodged. Truth be told, I wasn't actually sure what I was feeling. I've known attraction in my life. Sometimes deep, sometimes foolish, sometimes legally questionable, but what was brewing with Harper didn't feel like anything I could categorize. I kept replaying her smile in my head. It wasn't flirtatious or mischievous, or even admiring. It was kind. Genuine. A smile like that can ruin a man. I sipped my juice and tried to shake the thought away when my house phone rang. Yes, I still have a house phone. Don't judge me. I'm a man of habit, and besides, the ringtone sounds like a 1970s detective show, which adds much-needed drama to mundane conversations. I answered. Grant Residence. A too familiar voice purred on the other end. Darling. You sound tired. My blood froze. Vivian, I said. My ex-wife had the uncanny ability to appear exactly when I least wanted her to, much like a tax audit or a bear in a national park. Don't sound so excited to hear from me, she said. I was just thinking of you. And Pepper. How is my little fur angel? He stopped being your fur angel when you left, I said. Oh, don't be petty. Cats need emotional stability. Something you're not exactly known for. I'm hanging up now. Wait. Her voice sharpened. I heard something. From someone. I want to check if it's true. I rubbed my face. What is it now? Someone told me you're revising your will. And there it was. The rumor mill spins faster in Beverly Hills than in a high school cafeteria. And let me guess, I said, you want to know if you're getting anything. My interest is purely practical, she said sweetly. We were married for 12 years. I deserve some consideration. You got half the house in Montecito. And I sold it, she said, because heartbreak made it too painful to keep. Heartbreak? I snorted. You left me for a Pilates instructor named Sky. He offered emotional flexibility, she replied. I set down my juice. Vivian, we haven't spoken in months. Why call now? Before she could answer, Pepper leaped onto the counter and knocked over my juice bottle. Orange liquid gushed across the marble like a citrus crime scene. Vivian sighed theatrically. Look, can we meet? I want to discuss the will situation. Before lawyers get involved. Too late. What? I already hired one. There was a pause. Long, sharp, and satisfying. A woman, she said. Is she pretty? This conversation is over. I hung up. Lou strolled back into the kitchen, took one look at the spilled juice, shook his head, and said, Vivian? You're psychic. No, he said. I'm experienced. We cleaned up the mess, and I spent the next hour pretending not to think about Harper. Then I gave up pretending and called her. She picked up on the second ring. Mr. Grant? Good morning. Her voice alone made my kitchen feel warmer. That's how I knew I was in trouble. Hi Harper, I said. I was hoping we could meet again today. There's something I want to discuss. Well, she said, your updated draft is ready. I can bring it by your house if you'd like. You can? That'd be yes. Perfect. I sounded too enthusiastic. I cleared my throat in a very dignified manner. What time works for you? She asked. Whenever is easiest. All right, she said. I'll be there at 3. 3, I repeated. Great. Excellent. I hung up and turned to see Lou staring at me with an expression of paternal pity. Shut up, I said. He grinned. Harper showed up precisely at 3, carrying a leather portfolio and a travel mug of something that smelled suspiciously like cinnamon coffee. She wore a navy blouse, cream slacks, and a subtle smile that made my heart behave like it had forgotten the laws of physics. Pepper trotted toward her the moment she entered the foyer, tail high, as if greeting an old friend. He rubbed against her leg, purring loudly enough to rattle the floor. Someone remembers me, Harper laughed, leaning down to pet him. Yes, I said. He rarely approves of strangers. She looked up at me with a soft, amused expression. So I've passed the test? Apparently, I said. He's a better judge of character than most people I know. Pepper meowed in agreement. We settled in the study. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust particles that floated like lazy snowflakes. My house always feels too large for one person, but with Harper sitting across from me, it felt, momentarily, less echoing and more like a life someone actually lived in. She opened her portfolio and pulled out the updated will. "Before we get into the details," she said, "I want to clarify a few things, especially regarding Pepper's trust." "Clarify away." She straightened her papers. "Your current plan would leave a substantial amount in an irrevocable pet trust. That's legally sound, but it's generous, even for a pet trust. Pepper has standards." She smiled. "Apparently very high ones. I raised him well." She flipped a page. "Still, I need to ask, are you certain you want nearly 20 million allocated strictly for his care?" "Absolutely. He eats better than I do. Frankly, it's only fair." She gave me a look, somewhere between professional curiosity and genuine disbelief. "And you're okay with the fact that this decision might," she paused delicately, "affect how your family reacts?" "Oh," I said. "They already reacted." "Already? They have drones circling the property." She blinked. "Drones? Tiny buzzing ones. My nephew probably bought them on the internet. My family has the subtlety of a sledgehammer." Her laughter filled the study, light, musical, honest. A sound I didn't realize I'd been craving. "Looking forward to hearing their thoughts," she said jokingly. "You won't," I replied. "Because I'm not inviting them." Before she could respond, a knock echoed from the hallway. Lou appeared, clearing his throat. "Boss," he said, "you have visitors. I told you I wasn't seeing anyone today." "I know," Lou said. "But they're already on the porch." "Who?" I groaned. He stepped aside to reveal, through the glass front door, 3 silhouettes: my nephew Joel, my niece Brittany, and in the center, like a queen returning from exile, Vivian, wearing a white blazer, sunglasses, and an expression that could curdle soup. Harper turned to me, eyebrows raised. "That," I said, "is my past. Ideally kept at a distance of at least several zip codes." Pepper hissed at the door, which was the most accurate emotional reaction in the room. "Should I let them in?" Lou asked. "Legally you must," Harper said gently. "This is still their relative's home." I exhaled sharply. "Fine. But only because I don't want them scratching my door." Lou opened the door. My unwelcome trio swept inside like a gust of human chaos. Vivian removed her sunglasses dramatically. "Darling," she said, "we came because we care." "You care about my will," I corrected. She tilted her head. "Same thing." Behind her, Joel scanned the room like he was casing it. Brittany flipped her hair with such force it created wind. Then Vivian spotted Harper. "And who," she said in a tone dipped in venom, "might this be?" "Harper Shaw," Harper said politely, standing. "Mr. Grant's attorney." Vivian's eyes flicked between us, reading more than I wished she could. "A young attorney," she said sweetly. "Very young." "Older than Pepper," I replied. "That's all that matters." Pepper strutted forward and clawed Vivian's designer pant leg. I didn't stop him. Vivian gasped. "Your demon cat attacked me." "He has impeccable instincts," I said. Harper hid a smile behind her hand. Vivian turned back to her children, I mean, adult parasites. "Kids, go look around. See if anything's changed." "Changed how?" I asked. "You know," Vivian said vaguely, "signs of mental decline." "I'm right here." Joel whispered loudly, "Check the upstairs office for documents." Brittany nodded as if he'd proposed a brilliant military maneuver. I sighed. "Don't touch anything." But they were already halfway up the stairs. Vivian leaned closer to me. "Listen to me," she said. "I heard a rumor. About your will. About you leaving everything to the cat." I crossed my arms. "Not everything. But most. That's still being decided." Her eyes narrowed. "Then decide wisely." And right then, as Vivian stood there dripping false concern, as my niece and nephew ransacked my second floor, as Pepper arched his back and hissed at her ankles, something in me clicked into place. The noise, the greed, the assumptions, it all made Harper's presence feel even warmer, steadier, truer. I turned to Harper. "Let's finish the paperwork," I said. "Now." Vivian sputtered. "Now?" "With her watching." "With her guiding," I corrected. Before she could object, the doorbell rang again. Lou groaned. "I'll get it." He opened the door to reveal a man in a long coat, dark sunglasses, and the general aura of someone who narrates his own life like a noir detective. "Afternoon," the man said, flashing a badge. "Name's Knox." Vivian stiffened. "Why is a detective here?" Knox stepped inside and scanned the room with practiced suspicion. "I'm following up on a private inquiry," he said. "Questions about a possible exploitation of an elderly client." My jaw dropped. "I'm elderly now?" "You're 73, Harper whispered apologetically. I looked at her. "That doesn't make me elderly. That makes me storied." Detective Knox cleared his throat. "We received an anonymous tip about unusual legal changes in progress." My eyes flew to Vivian. "Anonymous, huh?" She shrugged like a villain in a soap opera. Knox stepped closer. "Mr. Grant, I'd like to ask you a few questions about the nature of your relationship with your attorney." Harper stiffened. "Detective, I assure you." "Everything is strictly professional," I interrupted. Knox studied us intensely, as if waiting for the walls to confess. Behind us, there was a loud crash. Joel shouted, "I'm fine," which meant he was definitely not fine. The detective frowned. "Should I be concerned?" "Yes," Harper said. "No," I said. Vivian clutched her chest. "This is all a misunderstanding. I only want what's best for him." Pepper leaped onto a bookshelf and knocked off a framed photo of my yacht, which shattered on the floor. Chaos. Pure chaos. And yet, through it all, Harper remained steady, her hand resting calmly atop her folder, her breathing even, her posture composed. She wasn't intimidated or annoyed or flustered. She was simply there. Fully present. Fully herself. I realized then that I trusted her more than anyone else in that entire room, maybe in my entire life. "Detective Knox," I said, "if you'd like to know whether I'm of sound mind, you can ask me anything." "All right," he said. "What's your intention regarding the changes to your will?" "My intention," I said clearly, "is to leave my estate exactly where my conscience points, and not where anyone else expects." Vivian gasped. Harper looked at me with an expression I couldn't decipher, but it wasn't fear. Or discomfort. It was something softer. Warmer. Knox wrote something in his notebook. Then he said the strangest thing. "Well," he said, "it seems to me you're perfectly capable of making your own decisions." Vivian sputtered. "But—" He snapped his notebook shut. "My work here is done." And just like that, he left. Harper exhaled. Vivian swore under her breath. Pepper trotted triumphantly around the shattered picture frame. I turned to Harper. "Where were we?" Her eyes met mine. "The part where you decide who deserves your legacy." "Right," I said, my voice unexpectedly steady. "Let's finish it." The room around us was still in turmoil. Footsteps upstairs, Vivian muttering threats, Pepper plotting another assault, but none of it mattered. For the first time in a long while, I knew exactly what I wanted. And the next step in this messy, ridiculous, unexpected story had only begun. I didn't intend for the next 48 hours to feel like the universe had placed me inside a blender set to mild panic, but life does what it wants, especially when you're a wealthy old man with a stubborn cat and a beautiful attorney who keeps inadvertently rearranging the architecture of your emotional life. By the time Harper left that afternoon, with her portfolio tucked neatly under her arm and her calm voice promising she'd finalize the next draft by Monday, I had survived an ex-wife invasion, a detective interrogation, 2 grown children rummaging through my house like raccoons at a campsite, and Pepper launching himself off a bookshelf in an act of feline resistance. Lou closed the front door behind her and stared at me. "You're in love," he said. I stared back. "I'm in indigestion. Possibly both." "No," Lou said. "That's the look." "There is no look." "There's absolutely a look," Lou said, pointing at my face. "Right there. The soft-eyed expression of a man who hasn't realized he's falling for someone way out of his tax bracket." "I am her employer," I said firmly. "And her client. And, also, her elder. Only by a few decades." "Exactly." He patted my shoulder. "Just don't do anything stupid." I sighed, as the man who has spent a lifetime proving that stupid is often unavoidable. The next day, Harper called me. Not for work, but because she needed clarification about a clause regarding Pepper's property right. "Yes, my cat has property rights. The modern world is a fascinating place. Can Pepper legally own the guest house?" she asked. "No," I said. "But he can live in it." Alone? With staff. There was a pause. Then her laughter, a soft, golden sound that traveled straight through the phone and warmed the kitchen where I was standing in slippers, holding a bowl of cereal I no longer wanted. All right, she said. I'll revise that accordingly. Thank you. And Harper. Yes. I hesitated. Never mind. No, what is it? Are you free for coffee sometime? The silence on the line was not frightening. It was terrifying. I braced myself for professional rejection, moral rejection, generational rejection, every kind of rejection a man can imagine in the span of 6 seconds. She said, very gently, as your attorney, that wouldn't be appropriate. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Of course. But, she added, once the will is finalized. My heart did something it hasn't done since the Carter administration. Maybe coffee wouldn't be the worst idea. I stared at Pepper, who was sprawled across the dining table like a spilled bag of fur. Did you hear that? I whispered. Pepper sneezed and rolled onto his back. I took that as approval. Unfortunately, I was not the only person who knew about Harper. My family, who possessed the subtlety of a marching band, had decided to pivot from passive spying to active sabotage. That evening I found Joel standing in my driveway wearing sunglasses and pretending to check the mailbox. Nice weather, he said, his smile too wide, too sharp. It's cloudy, I replied. But the sun is in the future. That didn't make sense, and we both knew it, but I didn't have the energy to ask what that was supposed to mean. I walked past him toward the gate. Go home. Can't, he said brightly. Mom wants to have a chat. I groaned. Not again. She says it's urgent. Her version of urgent means she broke a nail or wants money. He shrugged. She's inside. In my house. Yes. She let herself in. She says her fingerprint was still registered. Of course. I never deactivated her access. A mistake on par with adopting a pet bear because it looked sad. Inside, Vivian sat on my couch in a silk dress that probably cost more than the couch. She was scrolling through her phone with an expression of performative suffering. There you are, she said dramatically, as if she had been waiting for a rescue helicopter. We need to talk. No, we don't. Yes, she insisted. Sit. Against my better judgment, I sat. Vivian crossed her long legs, flashed her Hollywood smile, and spoke in her favorite tone, the mixture of sweetness and venom that had once charmed me and now activated my flight response. Darling, she said, I've been reflecting a lot about our past. Our life together. Don't, I said automatically. Hear me out. I think we made mistakes. Big ones. Maybe it's not too late to correct them. I stared at her. Are you asking to get back together? She tilted her head. Would that be so terrible? We had a good run. We nearly killed each other. That's passion. I rubbed my temples. Vivian, what do you want? Her face tightened. Fine. Honesty? I want to know what's happening with your will. I know that woman, Harper, she's influencing you. She isn't. She is. Trust me, I know the look of a man being seduced. I'm not being seduced. Vivian smirked. You're definitely being seduced. I pointed to the door. Out. She stood, offended. You're making a mistake. I've made so many mistakes that adding one more won't break the pattern. This isn't funny, she said sharply. It's a little funny, I admitted. Vivian leaned in close, lowering her voice. That girl wants your money. Actually, I said, I think she wants me to stop procrastinating and sign my paperwork. Vivian scoffed. She's 30. 29. That's worse. She's my lawyer, Vivian. That's all. For now, a traitorous voice whispered. She narrowed her eyes. Whatever you're feeling, stop. Before you embarrass yourself. Then she swept out of the house, perfume trailing behind her like a poisonous fog. I slumped onto the couch. Pepper hopped onto my stomach and kneaded my shirt with the enthusiasm of a baker with a vendetta. Do I look like I'm embarrassing myself? I asked him. Pepper responded by licking my chin. I wasn't sure what that meant. Over the next few days, things only escalated. Detective Knox returned unannounced, twice, claiming he needed further verification that I wasn't being manipulated. I assure you, I said, I'm manipulating myself just fine. He did not find that funny. Joel and Brittany appeared regularly, disguising their greed under the veneer of family bonding. They brought muffins once. They were terrible muffins. Vivian texted me a photo of her crying dramatically next to a glass of wine. I replied with a thumbs-up emoji. She didn't appreciate it. And through all this storm of absurdity, Harper remained the calm center. Professional, focused, brilliant. She stopped by 3 times for paperwork adjustments. Each time, she stayed longer, discussing legalities, then stories, then my ridiculous family circus. She laughed easily, but never at me. She never treated me like a fragile antique. She treated me like a person. I hadn't felt like a person in a long time. On her 4th visit, she lingered by my bookshelves. I didn't know you had first editions, she said. I collected them in my 40s, I said. I had more money than sense back then. You still have more money than sense, Lou called from the kitchen. Don't listen to him, I whispered. She smiled. I like your house. It feels lived in. No one has said that in 30 years. Then they haven't looked closely. She ran her fingers over the spines of the books. This place has history. Mostly arguments and bad wallpaper. I like it, she said again. The word sank deeper than it should have. We sat in the study again to review the newest draft. My pen hovered over the final line that needed my signature. Harper watched me quietly, her expression unreadable. This is a big decision, she said softly. I know. And it's yours alone. I know. And once this is signed, your family. I know, I repeated. She nodded. Then, whenever you're ready. I stared down at the paper. At my name. At Pepper's Trust. At the charitable allocations. At the small line, one of Harper's suggestions, that established a personal letter to be attached to the will, explaining my choices in my own words. I didn't write it yet. It felt too raw, too revealing. But her presence made the idea less frightening. I signed. She exhaled, soft, relieved, proud. You did it, she said. We did it. She closed the folder carefully. You'll get a finalized copy by Friday. Thank you. She stood. I did too. And there it was again, that momentary stillness that seemed to pull the rest of the world out of focus. Her eyes on mine. Mine on hers. The room warm with late afternoon light. If I were a younger man, I might have kissed her. If I were a braver man, I still might have. Instead, I said, Harper, you're a remarkable woman. Her smile lingered. You're not so bad yourself. Before I could respond, my front door opened and a voice boomed. Dad. You won't believe what Mom said. It was my son, my adult son, who lives in Miami, who never visits, who apparently decided today was the perfect day to return. He rounded the corner, saw Harper, and froze. He said. Am I interrupting something? Yes, I said. No, Harper said. We exchanged a look and both laughed. My son looked confused. I felt alive. Harper gathered her things. I should go, she said. Harper, I said quietly as she headed toward the door. She turned. When all this is finished, I said, about that coffee? Her smile held promise. Yes, she said. I'd like that. Then she disappeared out the door, leaving me with my son, my cat, and a heart that felt 20 years younger. This story wasn't slowing down. It was barely getting started. The morning after the study incident felt like waking up inside a soap opera directed by a mischievous god with a flair for irony. Sunlight spilled across the marble floors of my mansion, but I barely noticed it. My mind was occupied entirely by Claire, by the curve of her smile, the precision of her words, and the way she made even the most absurd legal loopholes feel like a thrilling adventure. I was sipping my morning coffee when the first sign of chaos arrived. A courier with a stack of envelopes, each one screaming legal trouble in increasingly loud fonts. I recognized the handwriting of my nephew Bradley immediately. I feared opening them, yet I also knew curiosity would win. It always did. Claire entered the kitchen, her presence commanding enough that even the cat, Whiskers, paused mid-stretch. Mr. Whitmore, she said, I think it's time we talk strategy. Your family is mobilizing faster than I anticipated, and your ex-wife, well, she's already charming the staff into thinking she's the victim of a terrible misunderstanding. I nodded, pretending I was calm, though the sensation in my chest suggested otherwise. I'm enjoying this, I admitted, more to myself than to her. Even if it's dangerous. Claire raised an eyebrow, that signature blend of amusement and sharp wit. Dangerous is my middle name. Well, actually it's not, but it might as well be if you keep letting your relatives roam free in your mansion. Just then, the phone rang. It was Evelyn, and the tone of her voice suggested she had stepped into full cinematic mode. "Darling," she said, silk and honey dripping from every word, "I think we need to have a little chat about possibilities. You know, for the family's sake." I groaned internally. I had never been more aware of how dramatically one's ex-wife could manipulate both space and time. Claire, however, didn't flinch. Instead, she clicked her pen and murmured, "I suggest we document this conversation. Legally speaking, it could be useful." Bradley appeared next, apparently teleporting from somewhere near the garage. He held a tablet, showing some dubious financial projections he had conjured in an effort to guilt me into altering the will. "Grandpa, you can't seriously leave everything to a cat. People will talk. The press will." Claire shot him a look so icy it could freeze molten gold. "People already talk, Mr. Bradley. And for the record, the press loves a billionaire's cat more than they love your sense of entitlement." I chuckled, feeling a surge of admiration for Claire that made my chest tighten in ways that were vaguely alarming. She was brilliant, unflinching, and entirely too young for me to be thinking about in that way. Yet every glance, every word, seemed to pull me in further. The day continued as a delicate dance of deception, negotiation, and subtle flirtation. We met with a notary to review the will once more, navigated Bradley's attempts at emotional manipulation, and endured Evelyn's Oscar-worthy performances for staff and neighbors alike. Amid the chaos, Claire whispered legal tips and quips in my ear, and I found myself laughing in ways I hadn't in decades. By late afternoon, the atmosphere had escalated into something resembling a battlefield. Nathan, the private investigator, showed up with photographs and documents that suggested a mysterious, and somewhat scandalous, past connection between Evelyn and a long-forgotten associate of mine. Claire studied the files, her eyes scanning faster than I could comprehend. "Interesting," she murmured, "but we can handle this. Carefully." I realized then that my fascination with her went beyond admiration for her intellect. Her presence in the room made every tension, every threat, every potential betrayal feel almost manageable. I was a man used to controlling empires, and yet here I was, willingly surrendering to the unpredictability of human and feline emotions. As the evening drew in, the mansion seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the first hints of night shimmered over the estate, and the distant sounds of the city mingled with the faint purr of Whiskers, blissfully unaware of his impending fortune. Claire leaned against my desk, her gaze fixed on me, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. "Do you ever feel," she said softly, "that life is just a series of carefully timed disasters, and somehow, you enjoy them more when you're with someone who understands the chaos?" I paused, feeling the weight of her words settle over me like a warm blanket. "I think," I said slowly, "that I might finally understand what you mean." And in that moment, with the papers, the relatives, the ex-wife, and the cat all part of an intricate, unpredictable dance, I realized something extraordinary. Love, much like chaos, did not ask permission. It arrived, unapologetically, and demanded to be noticed. I glanced at Claire again, and for the first time, I understood that no amount of wealth, experience, or planning could prepare a man for what it truly meant to be captivated by someone, heart and soul. As night settled in, and the mansion grew quiet save for the occasional rustle of papers or the soft thump of Whisker's tail, I knew that tomorrow would bring more intrigue, more threats, and perhaps even more moments that would make me laugh, sigh, and maybe, just maybe, fall a little deeper than I should. Claire smiled, a slow, knowing smile that made my chest ache in the best possible way. "Life," she said softly, "is full of surprises. And some of the best ones don't come with legal disclaimers." I squeezed her hand, feeling the warmth, the thrill, and the certainty that this, chaos, love, absurdity, and all, was exactly where I was meant to be. As night fully settled in, I glanced down at Whiskers, who blinked lazily at me with regal disdain. I laughed quietly. In the end, it seemed that fortune, family, and love were all intertwined in ways that made absolute sense only when you stopped trying to control them. Claire leaned her head on my shoulder, and for the first time in decades, I felt completely, undeniably, and wonderfully at peace. The world was unpredictable, my family was complicated, My ex-wife was still dazzlingly dangerous, and my cat was officially richer than most of my relatives. And somehow, against all odds, I was in love with the one person who had seen me, the real me, through the chaos and still chosen to stay. As the stars shimmered above, I realized that life, much like the intricate twists of a legal document, required patience, courage, and a willingness to embrace the absurd. And in that absurdity, I had found everything I hadn't known I was searching for: laughter, love, and the most loyal, demanding, and utterly charming feline heir imaginable. And perhaps, I thought with a private grin, the world could wait.